Christian McCaffrey, who had 10 catches, 88 yards on 15 targets. Wow. McCaffrey touched this ball 27 times in this game. He's definitely carrying the workload right now until they get some more help. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and today we're going to wrap up looking at the games from Week 3, including last night's really fun-to-watch game between Detroit and Baltimore. But we'll start with the rest of the Sunday games first. And we'll start with the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jacksonville won this game 17-10. It was a close game, though. Jacksonville did come out with the ugly win. Unlike last week where they were leading and they gave the game away, this time, as Houston was moving down the field to try to tie the score, Jacksonville actually was able to create a fumble situation and take the ball, and that was the game. But it was a little nerve-wracking if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan because of the fact that when you throw in last year and then last week, the Jaguars have a tendency to give games away, but this time they held true and they ended up winning the game. So they are now 2-1, and Houston is 0-3, and they are in trouble. Their offense is in dire straits. So let's look at the top 10 in this game. By the way, Houston now leads this series still quite a ways, 31-16. But in this game, despite the bad game that the Texans had on offense, Nico Collins did have 8 catches in this game. He was 7th all-time in the Houston Texans reception chart, and he jumped Brandon Cooks to move into 6th all-time. Nico Collins now has 232 receptions. Next up for him is running back Arian Foster, who's in 5th with 249. So probably 2-3 games, and he'll move into 5th. Andre Johnson is the all-time leader with 1,012 receptions. So quite a ways for Nico to go. Now for the Jaguars. Travis Etienne needed 46 yards, 47 to pass James Stewart to move into 3rd all-time in Jaguars rushing yards history. And he was able to do it just by a little. He had 56 yards in this game, so he ended up with 2,961 yards. That puts him into 3rd now all by himself. Now, the only problem there is unless he stays with his team, which seems doubtful, he will never catch number 2, Maurice Jones-Drew, who has 8,071. Fred Taylor is the all-time leader with 11,271. So those 1 and 2 numbers are way away from Travis Etienne. Now, also in the touchdown department, Travis Etienne was 5th in that with 18. He got one more on Sunday's game, so he ends up tying Stacey Mack for 4th with 19. So he's now tied for 4th in rushing touchdowns. Next up is James Stewart, who's in 3rd with 33. So quite a ways to go there. Doubt he can catch him this year. Very unlikely. But sometime next year if he's still with the team. Maurice Jones-Drew leads this category with 68 rushing touchdowns. Those are the top 10 in this game. So let's look at the numbers in this game. In some ways, it was a close game, but the Jaguars were able to force several turnovers again. They have been compared to last year, they have been very impressive on creating turnovers. Last year, in the entire season, 9 turnovers is all they ever had. They've already got that in 3 games. First downs, Jacksonville 17, Houston 13. Total net yards, Jacksonville 291, Houston 271. So it was fairly close. Big difference. And we'll look at it in a minute was the turnovers, really. That was the biggest difference in this game. Now, the Jaguars still, they are one of the most penalized teams right now in the NFL. They had 9 penalties for 70 yards again. Missed a field goal. Houston missed a field goal as well, but this game wouldn't have been as close had they made. It wasn't even a long field goal. I think it was high 30s, maybe 40s, something that Cam Little has no problem making normally. Jaguars had the ball for over 31 minutes to less than 29 for Houston, so fairly close in that category. Now, looking at the individual teams, start with the quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, let's see here. CJ Stroud was 25 of 38 for 204 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So not really that great of a game. On the other hand, Trevor Lawrence was 20 out of 40 for 220 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Now, he was 20 for 40, but there were 5 drops in this game. Terrible drops. And it wasn't this time just Brian Thomas, though he did have an easy catch that was a drop. 2 of them, really. One was more difficult. But even Parker Washington, who hadn't dropped a ball in the first 2 games and had been very consistent in preseason, he dropped a pass as well. It was like 3 passes in a row, in fact, drop. And they weren't difficult catches. It was amazing. And at that point, you think Houston's going to come back and win this game the way the Jaguars are playing at the time. But they did hold on and win this game. Now, looking at the quarterbacks, both quarterbacks do try to throw it beyond 10 yards, but neither was very successful. For Trevor Lawrence, 2 completions on 11 attempts over 10 yards. One of them was an interception, so he's just not having it. 0 for 4 over 20 yards and 2 for 7 from 10 to 20 yards. So rough there. Just could not get anything going. He definitely seems to, though he's right-handed, he definitely seems to be a quarterback who throws more to the center of the field or to the left, interestingly. So just something to watch. Now for CJ Stroud, again, he tried throwing the ball deep. Passes over 20 yards, he was 1 for 6. Had 1 interception, and he did have a touchdown. That was a fluke. That pass, 51 yards, I believe it was, to Collins. Defender for Jaguars got juked out by Collins so terribly. Jumped the route as if he thought it was going to be a short pass. Nico Collins had no one within 30 yards of him. He caught the ball. He just walked in the end zone. That was their touchdown, and it was given to them basically. That was the only way they scored. Honestly, they could not consistently move down the field except for that one play. Otherwise, from 10 to 20 yards, he was only 2 for 5 there as well for only 30 yards and 1 interception. So nothing there. Now, the problem they're having really is, again, a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage. 8 completions on 9 attempts behind the line on 10 attempts. Let's see, 7 out of 9. Let me put it that way. 7 out of 9 passes behind the line of scrimmage for a total of 7 yards. So, it's fine if you can do it, but it was doing nothing. And the same for Trevor Lawrence. He was 3 out of 5, so not as many passes behind the line of scrimmage, but for 0 yards. They did nothing with these types of passes. And I really hate these quick screen passes because it's being telegraphed to me when they try to do these quick passes to the wide receiver, whichever side they go, because you see defenders heading that way to try to help them, whoever's going to catch the ball. So the defense sees all these players moving in the direction of this quick screen pass, and so they're there ready to tackle whoever catches the ball. I just don't like the play at all. So those are your quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, like I said, 25 of 38 for 204 yards. He had a 66.1 quarterback rating. Trevor Lawrence, 20 out of 40 for 222 yards, had a 56.5 quarterback rating. Not good at all. All right, let's look at the Texans as far as the running game goes. They did have a decent average, total of 19 carries for 87 yards for 4.58. So not bad there, but Chubb led the team with 9 carries for 38 yards, 4.22. Parks, their rookie running back, 6 carries, 27 yards. And then CJ Stroud did have 4 carries for 22 yards. But they really didn't stick to the running game that much. A lot of passes, interestingly enough, despite the fact that the running game was doing fairly well. Now, looking at the receivers, again, the Jaguars had a difficult time with a star wide receiver. Nico Collins, 8 catches on 11 targets for 104 yards and a touchdown. One of those was 50 yards. He was the best receiver for Houston. Now, Christian Kirk, first game back, had 3 catches for 25 yards, but he was targeted 8 times. So part of that may be just CJ Stroud and Kirk getting on the same page, since Kirk hadn't been around in any games yet. This was his first one back. Now, Schultz, the tight end, had 5 catches for 39 yards on 6 targets. Nick Chubb did have 3 catches, believe it or not, but only 2 yards, so they're really very ineffective there. They just aren't including too many wide receivers other than Collins. If they can't find Collins, they're pretty much throwing it to somebody else. Really was a tough game overall for them, except for Nico Collins. Jaguars have a difficult time with the star wide receiver. Now, looking at the running game for the Jaguars, not so hot. But Houston, if you can say one thing about them, their defense may be bad, but their defense is extremely good. The offense is terrible. It's the offensive line primarily that's the trouble for Houston. But their defense did hold the Jaguars in check on the running game. Travis Etienne had 16 carries, but only 56 yards. He did have a touchdown, though, so that was good. It was a 10-yard run. He ran it in. Now, that one was toward the end of the game. It definitely looked like a gimme. It looked like Houston wanted to give up the touchdown. It was within 2 minutes left in the game. The game was tied to 10-10, and Houston figured the Jaguars would kick a field goal without a problem, and they would probably run a lot of the clock off. So it was 1st and goal at the 10-yard line, and Travis Etienne got the ball, and no one really made much of an effort. He ran it in for 10 yards. And then Houston tried to come down the field to tie the game up or to win it, at the end, but they couldn't score. Now, Tootin was also in this. He had 6 carries for 21 yards. Both of those players, Etienne and Tootin, averaged 3.5 yards a carry. Trevor Lawrence had 2 carries for 9 yards. One of them was super important 10-yard run for a first down. It was 3rd, and I forgot what the yardage was. Nobody open. He took off and ran and got the first down. It was one of the key first downs in the game at the time. Now, looking at the receivers for Jacksonville. Strange, the tight end, led the team with 6 receptions on 7 targets for 61 yards. Washington had 4 receptions for 34 yards, but he was targeted 11 times and only 4 catches. He did have that big drop. Now, Thomas, again, they tried to key him. 6 targets again in this game. He had 2 catches, 55 yards, but one of them was for 46 yards. It was later in the game. It was a huge play in that game that led to ultimately the Jaguars scoring the go-ahead touchdown. But that was his big play, but otherwise he did have a drop again, so that was troubling. Deontay Brown had 2 catches on 3 targets, went out of the game. Only 7 yards he had, but he went out of the game injured, so we'll see what's up with that. But as far as the running backs, Allen, the rookie running back, had 1 catch for 9 yards. Travis Etienne was targeted twice. He dropped 1, but no receptions. Tootin also targeted once, but no receptions. So nothing much there. All right. Those are some of the leading players. Let's look quickly at the defenses for Houston. For Houston, They did have one interception. Petrie had that interception. Al-Shahir, who Jaguar fans despise because of the late hit he had on Orange last year, did have 8 tackles, 4 solo. He had a decent game, actually. No sacks for him. The only Anderson, very good player for Houston, had 1 sack in this game. Let's look at for Houston on defense again. Like I said, Anderson had a sack, tackle for loss. Tremon Smith had a tackle for loss. They only had 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and the 1 interception. Now for the Jaguars on defense, get to that real quick. Campbell had a big game, 7 tackles. Tyson Campbell, though he did have a strip. He stripped the ball late in the game. That was the key when Houston was moving down the field. He stripped the ball, the ball from the player, and the Jaguars recovered, which made up for the huge blunder he made when Collins caught that 50-yard touchdown. So kind of redeemed himself there. Aluakon, again, always a tackling machine, had 6 tackles total, 5 solo. Big game. Lloyd had another good game, 6 tackles. Lewis had another interception. He has been spectacular as well, and Johnson had 1 interception. They had 2 interceptions in this game. It was really impressive. The defense has been playing so much better than last year. Devin Lloyd had a tackle for loss. Jordan Lewis had a tackle for loss. And Dennis Gardeck had a tackle for loss. And so did Trayvon Walker. Walker and Hines Allen both had good games. Hines Allen had a half a sack, and Trayvon Walker had a sack. And Eric Armstead had the other half sack. So they did get to the quarterback twice. So big game for the Jaguars. They win it 17-10. Next game up was one of the shockers, Green Bay. This is a huge shock. Green Bay at Cleveland. Cleveland wins this game 13-10. I don't think anybody expected that. I mean, I know I didn't. Cleveland does have a good defense, but you still don't expect to see that. It was something and Green Bay had this game for the most part wrapped up, and they ended up losing it in the 4th quarter. It was a shocker. So Green Bay now leads the series 14-8. Let's look at the top 10 in this game. Rashawn Gary went into this game on defense, tied for 9th all-time in tackles. Actually, he was in 10th in tackles for loss. Needed 1 to pass Preston Smith, 1 to tie him, 2 to pass him. He did get 2. So Rashawn Gary's now 9th all-time in tackles for loss for the Green Bay Packers. Next up for him is Mike Daniels, who played from 2012 to 2018. He had 47 tackles for loss. So that's next up for Rashawn Gary. Clay Matthews leads the team with 121. That is the only top 10 in this game. All right. Now looking at the game itself, it's just unbelievable. There's 2 games. Yesterday I thought Carolina crushing Atlanta was a major upset. This one was bigger than that in a way. I mean, Atlanta won 30-0, that was a strange game, but this one where Cleveland came out and won. It just shows you right now Cleveland's defense is incredibly good so far. Let's see how they did in this game. Cleveland only had 221 net yards, but Green Bay had only 230 themselves. And that was the key. I mean, Cleveland's defense was just all over the quarterback in this game. Sacked him 5 times. Love did not have a good game. Looking at it overall, and that's despite the fact that Cleveland had the ball for less than 26 minutes on offense, while Green Bay had it for more than 34. So they dominated as far as time of possession and just could not, early on, they finally got a touchdown in the 3rd quarter, Green Bay did, but at halftime it was 3-0. Now, Green Bay looked like they were going to walk away with it when they did. By the end of the 3rd quarter, they were up 10-0, but they gave it away in the last 10 minutes of the game. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here. For Green Bay, Jordan Love was 18 for 25 for 183 yards in this game. So really not a good game at all for him. And like I said, Cleveland's defense is incredible. Looking at the other quarterback, Joe Flacco, he did throw the ball quite a bit more times, but for a lot less yards. He was 21 completions on 36 attempts, but only 142 yards. That's not much. Like I said, Jordan Love, 18 for 25, 183 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now, looking at this game, Jordan Love was under such pressure. He was sacked 5 times and pressured a lot more. Had 1 pass, and it was completed over 10 yards. It was 34-yard pass, and that was it. Other than that, everything was short. He just could not, he didn't ever had time to throw the ball deep. Now, on the other hand, Joe Flacco did try to throw the ball deep. He was 3 out of 9 throwing the ball over 10 yards and only had 3 completions in those numbers. So just couldn't get anything done either. I mean, Green Bay has a good defense as well. So that's you figured that. And I really did figure that Green Bay's defense, along with no matter how good Cleveland's defense would win out in this game, but it did not happen. So what did Cleveland do then to the Green Bay offense? Well, shut down the quarterback, Love, who did have a decent quarterback rating of 89.2. But the running game, Jacobs, one of the top running backs in the NFL after week 2, had 16 carries for 30 yards, so under 2 yards a carry. Just couldn't get anything done. Love had 4 carries for 18 yards in this game. Those are their top 2. Looking at the Green Bay receivers, again, it was Jacobs coming out of the backfield. He had 5 receptions for 44 yards. He was targeted 9 times. That was by far. No one else was targeted more than 4. That just shows you that Green Bay was having a tough time even having the time to throw it down the field. Golden, biggest game for him so far. 4 catches on 4 targets for 52 yards in this game. Kraft, another, he is good, but he had 3 catches for 29 yards on 4 targets. So really not that many. There's only 18 receptions in the game. Romeo Doubs, the wide receiver, along with Golden, wasn't targeted as much as Golden. 2 catches for 25 yards and 2 targets. It was Fitzpatrick who had 2 catches for 12 yards, but one of them was the touchdown. So, as I've said from the start with Green Bay, I would have probably started Love despite the defense, but I would never want to start a Green Bay receiver. You just don't know who's going to be the guy that leads the team. All right, looking at Cleveland, obviously not that great of a game either. Flacco ended a quarterback rating of 55.6. Now, Judkins really looked good. Last week he had 10 carries. This week he had 18. So and he dominated. Judkins had 18 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. He does look good. Averaged 5.22 against Green Bay. Like I said, a good defense. Sampson had 1 carry for 2 yards. So this was all Judkins out of the backfield, except for 1 carry. He had the ball the entire time. He did have 1 catch as well, but only for a yard, but that's probably an area that you might see an increase as time goes by. Now for Cleveland in the receiving department, again, this is why I don't like 2 tight ends. I didn't like the idea of having to pick one or the other. I would have picked Fannin, but Njoku led the team with 5 catches on 7 targets for 40 yards. He had 40 yards. Ford out of the backfield did have 4 catches for 10 yards. In the running game, Ford did not even have a rushing attempt. So if he was on the field, it was just to catch a pass. Fannin, the other tight end, had 3 receptions for 25 yards on 4 targets. So Njoku was targeted 7 times to Fannon's 4 times as far as tight ends go. Top wide receiver was Tillman with 3 receptions on 3 targets for only 26 yards. So really not that great. Judy, if you had him, unfortunately, terrible game. 1 catch for 17 yards. He was targeted 5 times. So other than Njoku, he was targeted the most, but only 1 catch in this game against the Green Bay defense. So that's a look at the players, offensive players in this game for both teams. Now, looking at the defense real quick. For Green Bay, Walker had a massive game. 14 total tackles, 6 solo, 1 pass defense, 1 quarterback hit. He had a big game, really. Rashawn Gary, like I said, who moved into 9th place all time in tackles for loss, had a big game. Only 3 tackles, but he had 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and he had 3 quarterback hits. So big game for him as well. Now, Micah Parsons, a little quiet. He did have 2 quarterback hits, but he had 2 tackles, no sacks, no tackles for loss, no passes defensed. So a little quiet game for him so far, but it won't always be that way as far as he goes. All right, looking at the Browns defense. Carson Schlesinger, 10 tackles, 7 solo. He had a sack, tackle for loss, a quarterback hit. Myles Garrett, 6 tackles, half a sack, tackle for loss, a quarterback hit. Big game for him as well. And then one more, Malik Collins, 5 tackles. 2 of them were solo. He had 1.5 sacks, a tackle for loss, and he had 2 quarterback hits. So pretty good. Like I said, Cleveland sacked the quarterback 5 times. Had 7 quarterback hits. Big game for them. And they ended up winning, Cleveland. Now 1-2, and Green Bay falls to 2-1. This game was amazing because I was looking at Green Bay, and it still could be. It's only game 3. Things happen. I was looking at Green Bay and the Eagles as the 2 teams in this division. And right now, it looks we're back to the Eagles until Green Bay figures out their offense. Game number 3, New Orleans Saints at the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks dominated this game. It was in Seattle, and they ended up winning this game big, 44-13. It was quite a blowout. All right, looking at the numbers in this game, the top 10 for this game. By the way, New Orleans now leads the series 10 games to 9, so Seattle tightened it up this past game by this huge win that they had. All right, for the Saints, Alvin Kamara, quiet game for him. He was tied for 7th with 1 receptions. He only had 1 in this game, which was really low for him. This is the worst game he's had so far out of the top first 3. But he's now tied for 6th place with Ronnie Harmon with 582 receptions. This is now the NFL, and this is not just the Saints. This is for NFL running backs receiving. He's now 6th all-time, tied for 6th all-time in the NFL as far as receptions go by running backs. Next up for him is Tiki Barber, who has 586. So he needs 4, so maybe he has a bounce-back game. He could catch Tiki Barber. 5 receptions, he catches Marcus Allen for 4th, ties him for 4th. So that's the big top 10 for this particular game. Alvin Kamara, every week he'll be in the numbers, most likely. All right. Now looking at the numbers for this game, Seattle, and the numbers are somewhat deceiving. Seattle had 22 first downs. New Orleans had 21. Net yards, New Orleans had 284, and Seattle had 320. But honestly, this game was over at halftime, and Seattle, were able to shut things down, and really they had Drew Lock in the game. Sam Darnold came out. There was no point in like I said, the game was over at halftime. It was already 38-6 at halftime. Seattle racks up another 6 points in the third quarter, and they just turned it over to the second string, basically. So New Orleans was able to get a touchdown in the fourth quarter to, little pad the stats on their end of the game. But overall, Seattle did dominate, despite the fact that New Orleans had the ball for more than 32 minutes to less than 28 for Seattle. New Orleans did have an interceptions, 2 sacks. They were sacked twice. Not a good game at all. But, New Orleans played tough their first 2 games, and this game they just weren't. And those were home games for New Orleans, so that might have been part of the difference. All right, let's look at these quarterbacks in this game. For New Orleans, well, Rattler was in the game for the most part. Show came in, was 0 for 2 for him, but Rattler, 28 completions on 39 attempts for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He had a quarterback rating of 83.1, and Seattle does have a decent defense. So not too bad, but really not getting the ball down the field. Yards per attempt of only 5.6. So not that impressive. For Seattle, Sam Darnold, very quiet game for him. 14 completions on 18 attempts for 218 yards. So with fewer completions, he had more yards, and he had 12.1 yards per attempt. He had 2 touchdown passes as well. He had a quarterback rating of 154.2, so almost near perfect. Big game for him, and like I said, they didn't need to throw the ball much, and he was out of the game toward the end. Drew Lock came in. He was 2 for 3 for 15 yards in the last quarter. So those are your quarterbacks. Looking at the running backs for New Orleans, Alvin Kamara, 18 carries. He did have a lot of carries, but only 42 yards for a 2.33 yard average. His longest rush was 8 yards. Miller came in also. He played 7 carries for 27 yards. So they ran the ball a lot. But even despite the fact that they were behind right off the bat, it was 21-0 after the first quarter. This game was a blowout the entire game, basically. So really, 27 attempts rushing for 79 yards. That was less than 3 yards a carry. Now for Seattle, Walker, big game last week. Fortunately, if you had him, you put him in, he had 2 game-saving touchdowns. I mean, not game-saving, but for your fantasy team, he did have 2 rushing touchdowns, but he was only 16 attempts for 38 yards. So just over 2 yards a carry. That's terrible. Now, Holani also had 10 carries for 27 yards, but that's because, like I said, second half, Seattle was running backup players for the most part. Walker also had 1 catch for 12 yards, so he did touch the ball 17 times and did have those 2 touchdowns. Not that many yards, but touchdowns always help. Now, looking at the receivers, Olave, 10 catches on 14 targets, so they did try to get the ball to him, but 10 receptions, only 57 yards. Not much for a wide receiver. His longest catch as a wide receiver was only 9 yards. That's really, it's nice that he's getting the receptions, but you need him down the field farther. Now the tight end Johnson, again, another big game, though no touchdowns this time, but he did have 6 catches on 8 targets for 51 yards. So in PPR, that's not a bad game. Those 6 receptions are going to help. And then the 51 yard. Now Shaheed, 4 catches, 42 yards, 6 targets. He was the 3rd leading receiver in this game. Now Cooks, the other wide receiver, 3 catches, 24 yards on 5 targets. Those are your leading. And in this game, again, I don't know if it's a style with the new offensive coordinator or what, but Kamara, he's a hit or miss here lately, but 1 catch, 14 yards in this game. He was targeted twice. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out game in, game out. All right. Looking at the wide receivers for Seattle. Well, this was Smith-Njigba again. He's the guy. Only 6 targets, and he still produced, though. 5 catches on 6 targets for 96 yards and a touchdown. So decent game for him. You definitely would like more, but they didn't. They just only threw the ball, only had 16 receptions. Horton had 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown as well. Kupp, 2 catches for 31 yards on 3 targets. So that was basically it. No one else had more than 2 catches or 2 targets in this game for Seattle. All right. Looking at the defenses for the New Orleans Saints, Pete Werner, 13 tackles. So he had a good game, 7 solo tackles in this game. And then Demario Davis also had 11 tackles. 2 of those were solo. He had a tackle for loss as well. So did Nathan Shepard, had a tackle for loss. Not too, obviously not that big of a game for them. No sacks. They did not produce any sacks in this game for the Saints. Now for Seattle on defense, Josh Jobe, 11 tackles, 9 solo, 1 pass defense. Decent game for him. Ty Okada, 9 tackles, 7 solo, and he did have a half a sack and a quarterback hit. So big game for him. They only sacked the quarterback twice, but still. They did have 8 quarterback hits, though. So they were putting the pressure on the quarterback and were able to sack him twice. So big game for Seattle. They win it 44-13. They are now 2-1. New Orleans Saints are 0-3. Next up, Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. This game was close, but the Chargers stay undefeated. They win the game 23-20. So another win for them. In this game, looking at the top 10 right now, Denver Broncos lead the series 73-58 with 1 tie. Top 10 for the Chargers. This has been interesting to watch, at least for me, when you like these, whatever kind of stats there are. But the Chargers in scoring, it's been Keenan Allen and Cameron Dicker, and the kicker, and the wide receiver, Keenan Allen. They've been battling it out as they moved up into the top 10. Last week, Keenan Allen made it to the top 10 with 376 points, and Cameron Dicker, the kicker, was 11th with 374. Now, that was going into today's game, or Sunday's game. Keenan Allen had another touchdown. He's had 1 touchdown in every game so far. The only receiver to do that. But Keenan Allen now has 382 points to pass Dennis Partee, who was in 9th with 380. But Cameron Dicker had 11 points himself, so he now has 385. So he is now in 9th, and Keenan Allen stays in 10th, and Dennis Partee drops out of the top 10 altogether. So next up for likely Dicker, Allen held him off, but as a kicker, you're always going to generally have more points than any offensive player, game in, game out. Next up for Dicker is Austin Eckler, who has 418 points. So it'll be a few games before he can catch Austin Eckler. Now for the Broncos, Cortland Sutton made up for last week's game. He had 1 catch last week. Much better game this time. He had, looking at receiving yards, he was 10th going into the game. He had 118 yards, so past Haven Moses, who was 9th. Cortland Sutton now has 5,525 yards receiving, and that puts him into 9th. Next up for him is Vance Johnson, who has 5,695 yards. So it'll be a couple games. He needs 170 yards to tie him. I doubt he gets it in 1 game. He gets another couple 100-yard games, though. 2 games out, he'll move into 8th all time. Rod Smith played from 1995 to 2006, is number 1 all time for the Broncos with 11,389. So that's a ways away. Cortland Sutton's halfway there, basically. So a long way to go. Now, looking at the Broncos defense, Nick Bonito was tied for 10th in tackles for loss for the Broncos with 32. He got 2, which pushed him all the way up to 8th, tied for 8th with 34 now with Shelby Harris. Next up is Ian Gold, who played from 2000 to 2007. He has 39 tackles for loss, so he needs 5 more to tie Ian Gold for 7th place all time. Von Miller's put this pretty far out there. He has 142 tackles for loss for the Broncos to lead the team all time in that category. And that is a look at your top 10. Now, looking at the game itself, this was a close game all the way through. 10-7, the Chargers were winning at halftime. And then Broncos came back and they were winning at 17-16. It ended up 23-20. It was a very close game. Chargers came back in the end with 10 straight points to pull this game out. Really an interesting game to watch. Now for the Broncos, as far as the quarterbacks go, Bo Nix, 14 completions on 25 attempts for 153 yards and 1 touchdown. 87.6 quarterback rating. Doesn't seem too bad, but still, it's just not getting the ball down the field. And you've got some decent receivers on that team, but he just could not get it really to them too much. Though Courtland Sutton had a good game. Other than that, not really. Looking at his numbers, he did have that one long pass of 52 yards and a touchdown. That was the big play of the game for Bo Nix. But he was 1 for 4 on passes over 20 yards and 2 for 5 on passes between 10 and 20 yards. So not too good. Only 3 for 9 on passes over 10 yards. Too many passes behind the line of scrimmage. Just way too many. It's a common theme, but that's just the way it went. For Justin Herbert, a lot of passes here. 28 completions on 47 attempts for 300 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So he was heaving the ball quite a bit. Quarterback rating of 76.6. So not that great, but he didn't stop trying to throw the ball. He made a lot more attempts down the field. Kind of decent. Over 20 yards, it was only 1 for 4 for 20 yards, but it was a touchdown. But then when you look at 10 to 20 yards, he does definitely try to move around and throw this ball down the field. 15 attempts, he was 6 for 15 on passes from 10 to 20 yards. He did have an interception, though. But this is more than any other quarterback so far I've seen who's making this attempt to throw it down the field somewhat farther than just the dump-offs, though he does have a lot of passes that way. Interestingly for him, he is a right-hander, and most of his passes do go to the center or to the right of the field. Throwing to the left, he was 3 out of 11. So really not that great, though the touchdown pass was to his left. All right, looking at the Broncos in a losing effort as far as rushing goes. Dobbins, good game for him. 11 carries, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Decent game for him. Bo Nix, 8 carries, 33 yards. And then Harvey, the rookie, he's still not a factor here. 2 rushes for 2 yards. So wasn't really a factor. If it wasn't the quarterback, it was Dobbins. Those are the only 2 really who were touching the ball for the Broncos. Now for the Chargers, it was the rookie Hampton, 19 carries, 70 yards, only a 3.7 average, but Denver does have a good defense. He did have a touchdown, though, so that was big for him. Najee Harris had 6 carries, 28 yards, but he looks injured, and he might be out for the year. We'll have to see for sure. But that could mean Hampton really boosting his carries even more with really nobody to take the rushes away from him like Harris was starting to do. Justin Herbert had only 2 carries for 6 yards, though he does scramble around a lot, but he's looking to pass for the most part. All right, looking at the Broncos wide receivers, Courtland Sutton, big game, 6 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 8 times, twice as many as anybody else in this game. Now, Harvey was targeted 3 times for 14 yards, while Dobbins had 1 reception, no yards, though, on 2 targets. So Harvey did have more catches for more yards, interestingly enough. Other than that, Troy Franklin, 2 catches, 8 yards. Marvin Mims, 1 catch, 4 yards. That was it. It was Cortland Sutton basically or nobody. I mean, he had 118 of the 153 yards that Denver had for receiving. So it really was Sutton. Now for the Chargers, again, big games for Keenan Allen and Johnston. Quentin Johnston, 6 catches for 89 yards on 10 targets. Keenan Allen had 7 catches for 65 yards on 11 targets, and he had the touchdown reception as well. Like I said, he's had 1 touchdown in each game. He's the only receiver, I believe, that have a touchdown in every game so far. It's only 3 games, but still. Now, Hampton, along with his 19 rushes, also had 6 catches for 59 yards. He was targeted 7 times, so 25 touches by Hampton. Really a big game for him. The most disappointing, obviously, is if you picked up Ladd McConkey, 4 catches on 41 yards, 7 targets though. So he was targeted, but only 4 catches for 41 yards. That's tough right now. He really seems to continue so far be the 3rd wide receiver among these 3, Johnston, Allen, and McConkey. We'll see if it continues to be that way. Now, looking at the Denver defense, Alex Singleton, 12 tackles, 4 solo. He had a quarterback hit. Brandon Jones, 11 tackles, 6 solo, 1 pass defense. So big game for him as well. They did get to the quarterback, Herbert, 5 times. Nick Benito, like I said, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. 5 quarterback hits by him. He had a big game, really. They hit the quarterback 14 times. That's a lot for Herbert. A lot of abuse, but they wasn't enough to stop Herbert and the Chargers from winning this game 23-20. All right, let's move on to the Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. Another close game here with the 49ers pulling it out 16-15. Fairly low scoring game, but the Cardinals somehow lost this game. No top 10s in this game. San Francisco now leads the series 37-31. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here. This was a game of undefeated teams. Both were 2-0 going into the game. Looking at the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, 22 completions on 35 attempts, 159 yards. A 4.5-yard average in this game. That's not good. I mean, 4.5 yards a pop, that's just not going to cut it, really. Looking at his numbers here, he did have a touchdown, and he did have a quarterback rating of 82.9, but you're averaging like a running back type of yardage. He did try, 7 passes over 10 yards, 3 completions though, and only 1 for 3 on passes over 20 yards. It was for 32 yards. So there were a few passes beyond 10 yards. But again, a lot of passes that were short behind the line of scrimmage. He was 9 of 10 on passes behind the line of scrimmage. So 9 of his 22 completions went for a total of 40 yards because they were all just the dump offs. Now, Mac Jones had a decent game, 27 completions on 41 attempts, so for 284 yards. So 5 more completions, but he had 125 more yards than Kyler Murray. He had 1 touchdown, and he was intercepted once. So he ended up with a quarterback rating of 83.8. Not bad for a backup, really. Now, he only tried 2 passes over 20 yards, 1 completion for 34 yards. But again, he did try some passes from 10 to 20 yards. He was 5 of 11, not great. 1 was intercepted, but 5 of 11. And in this game, even though you do have McCaffrey, only 4 attempts behind the line of scrimmage, 1 for 4, but it was for 20 yards. The one catch was for 20 yards. So maybe that's something to say. You throw less of these little dump-offs behind the line of scrimmage, and it's more of a surprise than it is when you consistently just do it over and over. All right, now looking at the Cardinals in the running game. This was a bad game for James Conner, 9 carries, 22 yards, but he was injured. He's out for the year. So this will now be Trey Benson leading the Arizona rushing attack. He had 10 carries for 42 yards, 4.2 yard average. One of those was 29 yards, though. So he was 9. The rest of the time, he was 9 for 13. But he does have that ability to maybe a little bit more of a breakaway ability than Connor, but we'll see. It's his opportunity. I think he's been waiting. We'll see how he can do. Really nothing much there. 28 carries total for 106 yards, 3.8 average in this game. Now for the 49ers, obviously it was Christian McCaffrey. This team, with the way things are, with only one seriously good wide receiver, and then McCaffrey, that's it. But McCaffrey had 17 carries for 52 yards, no touchdowns again. So he was a workman. Brian Robinson came in for 2 carries for 22 yards. But that was it. It was mostly McCaffrey in this game. So neither team really was much on the rushing overall. Now looking at the Arizona receivers, Marvin Harrison had the most yards. Only on 3 receptions, he had 44 yards on 6 targets. So he was second most targeted behind the tight end Trey McBride, who had a good game, decent game because he did get a touchdown. He had 5 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. He was targeted 8 times, like I said, the most. It was Harrison and McBride targeted the most in this game. Now, Trey Benson did also have 3 catches for 9 yards coming out of the backfield. Other than that, really no one. Connor had already had 3 catches himself for 15 yards. So he'd already touched the ball 12 times before he was injured. And then Trey Benson came in and basically played a very similar game in a way, where the running backs had 19 carries and the running backs had 6 receptions. So they play a significant part for the Cardinals. At least they did in this game. Now looking at the 49ers, Ricky Pearsall had a good game. No touchdowns, but 8 catches for 117 yards. He was targeted 11 times, which was second best to Christian McCaffrey, who had 10 catches, 88 yards on 15 targets. Wow. McCaffrey touched this ball 27 times in this game. He's definitely carrying the workload right now until they get some more help in. We'll see how that goes between Jennings and Ayek coming back whenever he does. But right now, this is the McCaffrey and Pearsall game as far as the offensive players go. Missing Kittle as well. But 10 catches, 88 yards for an 8.8 average isn't bad for a running back, actually. Kendrick Bourne did have 4 catches for 38 yards and on 6 targets, so he was the next guy. Now, Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, had 1 catch for 1 yard, but it was a touchdown. So he stole the receiving touchdown from, well, it had to be at the 1 yard line. Wasn't McCaffrey, though, or anybody else. Somebody you probably don't have on your fantasy team. All right, let's look at the defenses. For Arizona, Mack Wilson, big game, 12 tackles, 6 solo, 1 tackle for loss, 2 passes defensed. They only had 1 sack in the game. That was by Josh Sweat, who also had 2 quarterback hits. Big game there for him as well. But Mack Wilson was the dominating player in this game. Now, Calais Campbell had 3 quarterback hits, but he was not able to get a sack or a tackle for loss. Right now, he's 3rd all-time in the NFL history in tackles for loss, but none in this game. Looking at the 49ers, Fred Warner, another big game. Obviously, he's a dominating defensive player, one of the best. 11 tackles, 5 solo, 2 passes defense. Big game for him. They only sacked the quarterback once. That was Bryce Huff, who also had a couple of quarterback hits. So they didn't get to the quarterback much. Obviously, it's somewhat hard to catch Murray. He can scramble around quite well. But overall, decent game. San Francisco wins it 16-15. Next game up, Dallas Cowboys at the Chicago Bears. Another interesting game. Not what I expected to see. Chicago Bears won this game 31-14. Really crushed the Bears, but part of that was the injury to Lamb. Really hampered the Cowboys game when Lamb went out of the game. That was a tough break for the Dallas Cowboys. All right, looking at the top 10 in this game, Dallas Cowboys now lead the series 16-13. Looking at Dak Prescott, he was tied going into this game for second all-time in Cowboys history with in sacks, being sacked, that is, unfortunately. But with 259 sacks, he was sacked twice in this game. So he's now second all-time, only behind Roger Staubach. Dak Prescott has 261 times he's been sacked. Roger Staubach's next up. He has 313. You really hope, if you're Prescott and the Cowboys, that he doesn't catch Staubach this year. That would be 52 more times being sacked. So I doubt he does. But that's the next up for Prescott. That is it for the top 10 in that game. Now, looking at the quarterbacks in this game, Dak Prescott, 31 completions on 40 attempts, which is a good percentage, 251 yards, 1 touchdown, but 2 interceptions in this game. So the interceptions really hurt. He had an 80.3 quarterback rating in this game. Now for Chicago, Williams had a big game, only 19 completions on 28 attempts, but 298 yards. One was a 65-yard touchdown bomb. He had a quarterback rating of 142.6. This is one of his best games so far. Really impressive in this game. Now, looking at the two quarterbacks, like I said, Lamb went out, and that really made it tough on Prescott as far as the passing game went. A lot of dump-offs. 2 passes, though, 2 for 2 on passes over 20 yards. So that wasn't good. 2 for 2 for 64 yards on passes over 20 yards. And actually, when you look at 10 to 20 yards, he was also 4 for 6 in that category. So he was successful in that area. The short passes between under 10 yards where the 2 interceptions came in this game. Just a tough break for the Cowboys as far as with Lamb's situation. Now looking at Caleb Williams, passes over 20 yards, 2 for 3 for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So big plays. One, like I said, was 65 yards and the other one 35. So really impressive in that category. And even when you look at passes 10 to 20 yards, he was 5 for 10 in that area as well for another couple of touchdowns. 4 touchdown passes in this game. Big game, no interceptions. He was not sacked. He has been, with his rookie year, he was one of the quarterbacks being sacked the most. So good for him. Good game for Chicago. They really needed this game, to be honest. Right now they were 0-2 going into this game. Now they're 1-2. You hate to start out 0-3. Now looking at other categories here, the running backs for the Cowboys. Javonte Williams, 10 carries, 76 yards. That's a good average. Had a bad fumble, just to cost the Cowboys at the time. He led the team. Miles Sanders had 9 carries himself for 41 yards, probably due to Williams fumbling that ball. Last week, you didn't see Miles Sanders hardly at all. Now, looking at Chicago, it was Swift. Really didn't have that swift of a game. 13 carries, 33 yards, only 2.5 yards a carry. Not good at all, honestly. Kyle Mononge 6 carries for 16 yards. As far as running goes, Caleb Williams had 5 carries himself for 12 yards, but the team had 29 carries for 87 yards, only a 3.0 average. So running game wasn't much to talk about. And obviously they started running the ball when they had such a big lead. And so Dallas is sitting there waiting. Now, looking at the receiving game, well, Jake Ferguson had a huge game as far as receptions go. If you had him as your tight end, 13 receptions, 82 yards on 14 targets. 13 receptions for Jake Ferguson in this game. George Pickens had 5 catches for 68 yards and 1 touchdown on 9 targets. So I expect to see him now, depending on how long Lamb is out. Pickens will be the number 1 wide receiver for the Cowboys, I'm assuming, in this game. Javonte Williams, coming out of the backfield, did have 5 catches on 5 targets, but only 16 yards. And Miles Sanders also had 3 catches for 12 yards. So the running backs had 8 receptions in this game. All right, looking at the Bears, Luther Burden, you might have started him. Only 3 catches, but they were for 101 yards. One of them was 65 yards. This is a tight end. So big game. Only had 3 targets. So 3 catches, 101 yards, and 1 touchdown. Rome Odunze, who's somebody probably started, 3 catches, 62 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 7 times, which was the most of any player for the Chicago Bears. Only 19 completions in this game, and they were spread out. DJ Moore had the most receptions, 4, but only 21 yards. He also had a touchdown, though, so that saved his game there. 4 catches, 21 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 5 times. The other tight end, Cole Kmet, had only 1 catch for 10 yards, but if you did play him, it was for a touchdown, so saving grace there. 4 touchdowns, 4 players had one of them. Colston Loveland, 1 catch for 31 yards. So this ball was spread around by Williams in this game. All right. Looking at the defenses for Dallas, no one really stood out great. They only 1 quarterback hit in this game, no sacks. They did have 4 tackles for loss, so really not a good game at all as far as the defense. I mean, you're giving up 31 points. They're giving up a ton of points every week. Gave up 30 to the Giants. I mean, this is not looking good for the Cowboys as far as their defense goes. Now, for the Bears, Tremon Edmonds, 15 tackles, 6 solo, 2 passes defense. Big game for him. Same for Noah Sewell, 11 tackles, 6 solo. Big game there. They sacked the quarterback twice, and they had 7 quarterback hits in this game. So big game there. Montez Sweat only had 2 tackles, but one was a tackle for loss, and he hit the quarterback twice. The Bears win this game 31-14. They are 1-2, and Dallas falls to 1-2. Next up, Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Giants. This is a game that Kansas City wins it 22-9. Not that pretty. And this was closer really than the score. Some interesting or bad play calling by the Giants and by Wilson might have cost them the chance to actually pull in the lead or keep this game closer than it was. But the Giants do lead this series 11-5 now. Now looking at the top 10 in this game, the one number here, and we don't know how far this will get because Russell Wilson, we'll see how long, if he plays next week, if he's a starter next week, we will see. But Russell Wilson went into this game tied for 3rd all-time with Tom Brady with 565 times being sacked. He had 2 more sacks this game, so he's now 3rd all-time by himself. Next up for him is Fran Tarkington, who is 2nd with 570 times being sacked. Aaron Rodgers is 1st with 578. There was a chance I thought Wilson could catch Rodgers, but you know what? I'm not sure how long Wilson's going to be the quarterback. We'll see. He did not have a good game at all. And looking at his numbers, by the way, that is it for the top 10 in this game. Looking at Wilson's numbers, 18 completions on 32 attempts, 160 yards, which is a 5-yard average, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, for a quarterback rating of 43.8. Not good at all. Looking at Mahomes, 22 completions for 37 attempts for 224 yards, 6 yards on an attempt, 1 touchdowns, no interceptions. So not really that great either. His quarterback rating was 49.7. And actually, the quarterback rating for Russell Wilson was actually 6.5. I was looking at a different number, 6.5. That's horrendous. So we'll see what happens with him. Just interesting. And we can look at the stats on this as well. Wilson had 18 completions and on 32 attempts. He tried 6 passes over 20 yards, 0 for 6 with 2 interceptions. So he did try, but really with more of a hope and wish type of throws that he was trying to get to Neighbors predominantly. But 0 for 6 over 20 yards, 2 interceptions. That's horrendous. When you go look at from yards 10 to 20, he was 2 for 4 in that category for 30 yards. Make that 40 yards. So really, he just had a rough game all the way around as far as trying to pass the ball. Only 160 yards passing. Kansas City sat back and dared him, and he tried to throw it deep, and they just let him try, but he had no luck at all. Like I said, having this 2 interceptions in this game. Now, Patrick Mahomes, a lot of dump-offs, really quite a few dump-offs behind the line of scrimmage, under 10 yards. He did try, though, 6 passes himself over 20 yards, only 1 completion for 33 yards. So he did attempt it, with all the scrambling he's been doing. Much better when it came to passes 10 to 20 yards. He was 4 for 7 in that category with 1 touchdown. So did a lot better in that area. All right, let's look at some of the numbers here. Looking at the running game for the Giants. Well, Tracy might be out now, I think. He had 7 carries, 29 yards. But Cam Scatterbo came in, 10 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. So he looked pretty impressive. Wilson, 5 carries, 27 yards in this game. And Devin Singletary will be probably the backup now. 4 carries, 11 yards. Jackson Dart did come into this game, and all he did was carry the ball 1 time for 3 yards. Interesting to do that. Now for the Chiefs, they did try to run the ball a little bit more. They split the carries, so there's no running back you really want to start here. Now Mahomes did carry the ball again 5 times, but only 2 yards this time. He came in leading the team, and he still does lead the team in rushing. But Isaiah Pacheco had 10 carries for 45 yards. Kareem Hunt had 10 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. So they split the carries. Now Kareem Hunt, fewer yards, but 1 was short yard run for a touchdown. So they appear to be using him if they're near the end zone, near the goal line. All right, looking at the Giants in the receiving department, this is again Cam Scatterbo. So he touched the ball 16 times, 10 times rushing, 6 times receiving. He led the team in targets, 6 receptions for 61 yards on 8 targets, which was more than Malik Neighbors, who had 7 targets. They really made it very difficult. I mean, Malik Neighbors is the guy. Malik Neighbors, terrible game. And you played him on your fantasy team, but 2 catches, 13 yards is all he had. And if you put in Wan'Dale Robinson after that big game he had last week, more like a career game, and maybe will probably be his career game, he had only 1 catch on 4 targets for 26 yards. So neither one of those players did anything at all. No touchdown passes. And so really the only player on this team that did any good, if you had him, was Cam Scatterbo, who did have the 1 rushing touchdown and totaled 121 yards from line of scrimmage. So really a good game for him. Now, looking at the Chiefs wide receivers, Again, this is all over the place. Tyquan Thornton led the team with 5 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown, and he was targeted the most as well, 9 times. So he was the leading receiver all the way around, receptions, targets, and the touchdown, and yards, everything. Juju Smith-Schuster had 4 catches, 55 yards on 4 targets. Hollywood Brown, 4 catches, 42 yards on 6 targets. And then Travis Kelce, the tight end, 4 catches, only 26 yards on 7 targets. So 4 receptions on 7 targets. He was targeted second most in this game. Checo and Hunt, just like they tied in carries, they tied in receptions as well. Each had 1 reception. Hunt's for 10 yards, Pacheco for 3 yards. So it was they did have a total of 329 yards of offense. So not bad for the Chiefs as far as receiving and rushing go. Now, looking at the defenses, for the Giants, Bobby Okereke had 8 tackles, 4 solo. That was really the best. Brian Burns had 6 tackles, 5 solo. He also had a sack, and he had 2 quarterback hits, 2 passes defensed. So he had a decent game as well. I mean, this was, again, Mahomes had to do a lot here in this game. In fact, he had one play, which is a key play, where he fumbled the ball, but he was able to recover his fumble. So that was big. He fumbled the ball twice, actually. But somewhat of a rough game for him, though no interceptions. He was sacked twice. All right, let me look at the quarterback rating. Like I said, for him, it was only 49.7 quarterback rating. Not good at all. All right, let me compare that and see here. You know, when you have different sites, that's interesting that's what they say. Let me see what his quarterback rating was for real here. I want to make sure I'm right about this. All right. Patrick Mahomes' quarterback rating was 85.9. That sounds more like it. And then for Russell Wilson, quarterback rating was 43.8, which is terrible. Like I said, we'll see what happens with him going into this next game if they decide to make the move. All right, so Kansas City, this was a game among 2 teams who had not won a game yet. Kansas City comes out of it 1-2. Now, like I said, this was a game that the Giants weren't out of it from the get-go. They just did not play smart. Wilson didn't play smart, and some of the offensive play calling was questionable as well. So they stay now. They are 0-3. Next game, which was the Monday night game, Detroit Lions at the Baltimore Ravens. What a game that was. That was a close game for the most part until the end, when I think Detroit finally figured out how to handle Lamar Jackson. He was having a good game, and they did a good job toward the end of shutting him down when it came time, when it was really, necessary to do. All right. So looking at the top 10 in this game, this is the Lions, and they're 2 incredibly great running backs, honestly, in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. They had huge games. So in the rushing touchdown department, going into this game, Jahmyr Gibbs was in 5th all-time rushing touchdowns. David Montgomery was 7th all-time. They both had 2 touchdowns, so now Gibbs has 29 rushing touchdowns. David Montgomery has 28. So Jahmyr Gibbs now is 4th all-time by himself. He passed Nick Pietrosante, who has 28, and David Montgomery is tied now with Pietrosante with his 28 as well. So Gibbs 29, David Montgomery 28. They're 4th and 5th all-time in in the Lions rushing touchdown category. Next up for both of them is Dutch Clark, who played way back in the 30s. He held this record until Barry Sanders came along and crushed the record. But Dutch Clark has 33 rushing touchdowns. That's next up for Montgomery and Gibbs. And then Barry Sanders leads this team with 99. But the Gibbs-Montgomery combination has been very impressive. And we'll look at that in a minute. But looking at the quarterbacks, Jared Goff was 20 completions on 28 attempts for 202 yards, 1 touchdown. He had a quarterback rating of 103.6. So he had a good game. And then for Lamar Jackson, really a good game, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But he was 21 completions on 27 attempts for 288 yards, averaged 10.7 yards an attempt. He had 3 touchdown passes. He had a quarterback rating of 148.1. That's massive. I mean, that's incredibly good. But he was sacked 7 times, and it cost him. Times when he really needed to do something with the ball instead of moving around the way he did. But looking at the numbers overall, first downs, Detroit had 24, Baltimore had 21, total net yards, 318 for Baltimore, 426 for Detroit. This is a couple games now that Baltimore's given up a lot of points. I know they were against the Buffalo Bills and Detroit Lions, 2 of the best teams in the NFL, so you wonder about it. They've played some tough games. I mean, you're talking about 3 of their games against these 2 teams. 2 of the best teams. So they've started off with a tough goal. Now, in the rushing department, total net yards rushing, Detroit 224.85 for Baltimore. That was a key to me in this game, plus the fact that Detroit was able to get to Lamar Jackson 7 times, sacked him 7 times, while Baltimore never touched Goff. He was not sacked at all. In this game, Detroit had the ball for over 33 minutes. Baltimore had it less than 27. So they dominated in that category as well. They both are excellent in third downs. The big key here was Baltimore was 6 for 11 on 54% on third downs and 0 for 1 on fourth down. While on third down, Detroit was 7 of 14 for 50%, but they went for it on fourth down 3 times, and they made every one of them. So that was one of the big keys as well in this game to me. All right, now looking at the quarterbacks, like I said, Jackson was 21 for 27 for 288 yards, 148.1 quarterback rating. For Detroit, Goff 20 for 28 for 202 yards and 103.6 quarterback rating. He had 1 touchdown. Not as quite as proficient. It's only 7.2 yards an attempt versus 10.7 for Lamar Jackson. Now, looking at the running backs, Montgomery had a huge run, almost was able to run it in. He just ran out of steam. He had a 72-yard run. He was 12 carries for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. Gibbs, 22 carries for 67 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had just over 3 yards per carry average. But honestly, a couple of them were those short touchdown runs. The 2 running backs just looked impressive this whole game. So they had 38 rushes. Goff had 4 for 6 yards, but 38 rushing attempts for 224 yards, average 5.89. I mean, they dominated the ground game. Really, Baltimore just couldn't stop them. On the other hand, for Baltimore, Henry, 12 carries, 50 yards. He did have a touchdown, but he did not look that good to me. He had a 4.17 yard average. They had him down. It was 1st and goal inside the 5, and Henry just couldn't do it. They had a 4th down play. I mean, just times when Henry was given the ball and needed just to get a yard and could not do it. I don't know. We'll see. He did have a 28-yard touchdown run in this game, which tells you a lot. He only had 50 yards, so he had 11 carries for 22 yards after that. That 1 touchdown run really helped him out. I don't know. We'll see how he does, but it did not look as impressive as the first game. First game, he looked awesome, and we'll see how it goes. Of course, last week it was horrible. This game was slightly better, and the touchdown did save him. He also had one catch for 7 yards as well, so he touched the ball 13 times. It was only Henry. As far as rushing goes, it was either Henry or Jackson. No one else touched the ball as far as running goes. Now, looking at the receivers for Baltimore, Mark Andrews came out of hibernation, and you hate when this happens because he looked unbelievably bad. One catch in each of the first 2 games. 6 catches in this game on 6 targets for 91 yards, 2 touchdowns. Huge game for him. Just a huge game. Just did not expect it, really. I didn't. Whereas if you had Zay Flowers, who had been very impressive, 2 catches on 3 targets, only targeted 3 times, 2 catches, 13 yards. Bateman was the guy on offense. I mean, as far as wide receivers go, 5 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown, and targeted 7 times. He was targeted twice as much as Zay Flowers, more than that. And Mark Andrews had 6 targets. No one else had more than 4, and that was Hill, who had 3 catches for 45 yards. So that was it. I mean, really, Hopkins not in this game much, targeted twice. He did get a penalty on the defender on a play he had, so that was helpful, but he only had 1 catch for 13 yards. And looking at Detroit, they just had a big game all the way around, really. I mean, St. Brown came out and did have a good game this time. 7 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. He was targeted 8 times. So they did make a concerted effort to get him the ball. Now, Gibbs, along with his 22 rushing attempts, had 5 receptions as well. So he touched the ball 27 times in this game. He had 32 yards rushing. So he did have 99 yards total in this game, and he did have the 2 touchdowns. So really big game as far as fantasy go. Now, Montgomery only had 1 reception for 13 yards on only 1 target. So as far as the passing games, it's much more Gibbs. So in the end, Gibbs touched the ball 27 times, Montgomery 13. So twice as many times for Gibbs. But like I said, Montgomery had that 72-yard run. He was open. He just could not outrun the defenders, and you could tell he was running out of steam as he was going. Now, as far as the tight end, Sam Laporta, 4 catches, 33 yards on 4 targets. So really not the game you were hoping for if you had him as your tight end. And Williams, who boom or bust, 2 catches, 43 yards, no touchdowns. St. Brown had the only receiving touchdown. That's basically it for those players. Looking at the defense, no interceptions for Baltimore in this game. And as far as other players, Kyle Hamilton, 9 tackles, 5 solo. John Jenkins, 8 tackles, 5 solo, and he had a tackle for loss. Those were basically it. They had 5 quarterback hits on Goff. That was it. No sacks. We were able to hit him 5 times, but really couldn't get to him too much. Now, on the other hand, for the Lions, they didn't have any interceptions either, but looking at their players, Jack Campbell had 8 tackles, which were all solo. He had a sack as well. In this game, they were able to get to, like I said, Jackson, 7 sacks. They sacked him 7 times, had 6 tackles for loss. That's impressive. So they really, and this was mostly early on in the game, they were not getting to him. Later in the game, they had him figured out, and they stymied him trying to throw the ball down the field, and he ran around a lot trying to find an open receiver, and he would end up getting sacked. Instead of either dumping it off or running, just simply running for whatever he could get, he would try to throw it, and he was getting sacked. They really did put a lot of pressure on him in the fourth quarter, especially. All right. Detroit Lions win this game 38-30. They are now 2 wins, 1 loss, while Baltimore falls to 1 win, 2 losses. Interesting start for the Ravens, one of the contenders for the Super Bowl. as is Detroit. So we'll see how the seasons go. But Detroit looked pretty good these last 2 weeks versus the first game of the season. All right, that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. We covered the games. Now, tomorrow we'll look at the standings. We'll see how all the teams are doing and what surprises there are in the standings, like for the fact that Baltimore's 1-2, Kansas City's 1-2. So we'll see what that looks like. We'll also look at the stats, what players are leading the NFL in their various categories, and then we'll follow that up and wrap up tomorrow's episode with a look at the fantasy leaders. Who's the players you want to start? Who's the players you want to sit? And as we get more games, obviously it'll become a little more clear on who to start, who not to start. For example, Andrews looked horrible the first 2 games, but had a big game this week. So that is a wrap. Appreciate it if you like and subscribe to this podcast. Send me any comments if you I appreciate any kind of, as this is a new podcast, so any tips, any whatever you feel you might want to suggest, I'll take it and I'll see what I think about it. Please like and subscribe. You can find me on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. Also, email me at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com. I'm on all the podcast sites, Apple, Spotify, and if you don't find me, let me know, and I'll make sure I get there. Find me on Facebook, X, and Instagram as well. I appreciate it again that you listen, and that is a wrap. Until next time, I am out.